IronOverLoad.io hardcore episode 25. What's up, guys? And Steve and Da Mobster joining. Yeah, what's up?
This is the hardcore of all hardcore oral cycles, in my humble opinion, Steve. So, guys, if you are absolutely crazy, you might like this one. But seriously, you're going to need to pay proper attention to the advice we're going to give you today. Back to you, Steve.
Today, we're going to talk about stacking pre-contest two oral steroids. And the two oral steroids we're going to talk about is oral Trenbalone and Halotestin. So this is why we call this hardcore. Listen, some of you might want to click out of this one. This is a stack, not for the faint of heart on this one. So let's talk a little bit about stacking these two pre-contests. Now, why would you do that? I think in this situation, these two together would be absolute craziness. So oral Trenbolone, it's got two main ester forms. You have acetate and you have metrobolone, which is methyl trianolone. And look, oral Tren never gained much popularity. 95% of the time, people are going to be using the injectable version, and they much prefer that. But in this case, we're going to talk about metrobolone, methyl trianolone. We're going to focus on that. It's got an altered 17th carbon position for oral use. And, a lot of people like to use the oral version. They don't want to inject. They want to be more flexible with what they do. So the nice thing about oral Trenbolone is it doesn't aromatize or convert into estrogen. And that's why it's a really good one for pre-contest. If you want to cut down, if you want to get harder, you want to get more vascular, you want to get the benefits of Trenbolone. And, injectable Trenbolone doesn't aromatize into estrogen either, by the way. So either way, you're covered. You don't have to worry about estrogen either way. The issue with the oral Tren and the injectable Tren, they're both hepatotoxic. So again, people think, well, oral Tren is going to be hepatotoxic, but the injectable Tren is not. That's false. Injectable steroids are also toxic to your organs, including the liver. That's just how it is. Anytime you put a foreign substance in your body and you jack up the dose like crazy, it's going to be liver toxic. Just like you can go to the pharmacy and get a prescription that a doctor wrote for you, and you take 5-10 times what you're medically supposed to take. It's going to have side effects. It's going to affect your liver as well. So you can't tell me, oh, Steve, the injectable form of Trenbolone is going to be safer than the oral Tren. It's just not true. And you can run blood work if you don't believe me on that. Now, look, at the same time, we have studies that show that oral Tren does have, we've seen the way it's structured. It has a 17 alpha methyl group attachment, and that's going to definitely cause a liver strain. And it's also a 19 Nor steroid, and has the ability to bind well in all tissues. And it's a great choice for androgen receptors, hitting those androgen receptors. It's also resistant to metabolism. It's not going to interfere with some of the other things in the body as well. It's a very, very strong, and you want to definitely respect it. And some people have called it the most powerful steroid ever, most powerful oral steroid ever. So that's one of those things, just depends on your it depends on your perspective. But look, at the end of the day, some people say it's more mild than the injectable Trenbolone. They don't feel as many side effects. So it really depends on what kind of dosing that you're going to mess around with when it comes to using oral Trenbolone. So really quick, Monster, before I bring you in, you're talking 1 to 2 250 microgram tablets for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And you really want to keep an eye on your numbers when you're on this stack. So let's push it to 4 weeks on this stack ahead of your competition, maybe even 3 weeks at the most. So that would be definitely the way you would run it. And at the end of the day, usually you know, each tablet will come in 250 microgram. So you would just go ahead and take one tablet a day, and that would be your dose of the oral tren. So Mobster, yeah, definitely chime in on this. I don't mean to hog the whole podcast. Yeah.
I'll talk about halotestin, but I think the only other oral, I've used it orally because that's the way that you use it for strength or powerlifting competitions, probably check drops, which off the top of my head, Steve, I think Miralabone is the technical name. I might be wrong on that one, guys. You be sure to correct me in the comments. Halotestin, and again, I agree with some of the same side effects that you're going to get from Trenbalone, you're going to get from Halo. And again, like Steve said, 4 weeks, in my opinion, for this particular cycle. And again, that's because of the issue of the side effects. Something I've said in previous podcasts when we've talked about Tren and any of the harder drugs. And when I say harder drugs, I mean the ones that are the most likely to have an effect on your body to the point where you can sometimes get irritable and feel like they're working. Halo and Trenbalone are right up there. And so therefore, the more productive vis-a-vis in terms of strength or muscle or getting leaner, and the more you quote unquote feel them working, then the more likely you are to have side effects. It's just that simple. You've got drugs that we've talked about in previous podcasts where you go, oh, you won't really feel it on them, but you'll notice the difference at the end, and someone will say you dropped 4 pounds. And you'll go, well, I wasn't even sure it's working, but someone says I look leaner. This stack is not that stack. This stack is, man, honestly, I mean, abused, and these are the sort of stories that we've heard going out there. Abused, both of these run at silly amounts, silly dosages, is where you'll get people peeing blood, or there'll be blood in your urine. I'm not exaggerating for the sake of effect. That is the case. And again, sometimes when you've heard of those stories with other drugs, it's because it's not what you thought it was on paper. I'll just give you some of the numbers here, guys. Users of Halo were reporting increased strength very quickly without water weight being put on. This is to the ridiculous anabolic and androgenic ratios. On paper, it is almost 20 times more anabolic than testosterone and arguably 10 times more androgenic. Now, I've said in previous podcasts, sometimes the chemical scores and the numbers that people apply to is our way of trying to figure out what works better and so on and so forth. In reality, that's not necessarily the case. However, these two, especially in combination, are potent. And something that we're going to talk about when we're talking about side effects, as we will in a moment, is make sure you use an organ protector like N2Guard on this cycle. This is not something that you guys, I don't want anybody that does this cycle to be cheap. Buy a product, organ protector like N2Guard, and don't just have it handy, guys. Use it. There was talk, Steve, I think, mentioned in multiple podcasts about getting your bloods done. See, this is one where your numbers will be off. Your lipids will be off. Your doctor, if he didn't know you was doing anabolic steroids, would go, what the fuck? And so you 100% need an organ protector on this cycle. Halo is highly rated, especially in the power and strength community. I've used it and Steve's used it, and funny enough, neither one of us, and that might come down to our personality types, didn't seem to get much from it. But I know from talking to my strength buddies that Halo is highly regarded on its own as a great increase, a slight increaser in aggression, but especially increasing the ability to fire, to power on the day of a weightlifting or strength competition, specifically powerlifting and strongman, I'm thinking of. More than say, for example, the explosive style of Olympic lifting, and they are both. And I think Halo has a great reputation in the bodybuilding community as a hardener. If all again diet, cardio, and everything else is in place, a lot of users are reporting hardening up, like Masteron, of the muscle, but with that increased aggression, with that increased power in the gym. So it's a great combination. But again, as for me, I think check drops. I never saw anybody recommend more than 2 weeks, Steve. For me, this is a short blaster. I'm, as you know, when I've talked about orals before, 6, 7, 8 weeks. Never really run them longer than that. This, to me, is one of the few cycles I would run for a much, much shorter period of time. I can handle Anadrol, for example, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, although I prefer it shorter. Here, I would not run it more than 4 weeks. I just would not. These again, and it depends on your how you respond. But this, and again, Halo on its own is a very popular finisher for some people in their cycles before a competition. But as we say, both these items are liver toxic. You need to keep that in mind, and you need to protect yourself in the right particular way. And as great as the increase in aggression and power, and as great as a decrease in body fat and hardening of the muscle is, they must both be treated with respect. Dosage wise, Steve, especially if I was running it as a combination, but on its own, don't exceed more than 40 milligrams a day, guys. You're in the danger zone in terms of abuse. And again, your lipids, your blood numbers will show that, you know, you might be doing some amazing stuff in the gym, but the potential for damage above and beyond the length of the cycle is there. Now, of course, guys, when we come to sensible advice, we talk about sensible dosages. When we talk about liver protectors, organ protectors, into guard, that's about repairing as much of the damage as possible and getting your numbers back to normal as quickly as possible. But for me, Steve, I would want a good length of time off after this cycle, and I'd probably want to get tested again and have my bloods to make sure they come back down into the range they're supposed to be before I even think about doing something. That might mean that the PC takes a little bit longer, which is another reason why it's run close to competition for bodybuilders and close to competition for weightlifters and strength athletes. Because after the competition, guys, that's when you rest and recover. So keep those in mind. What about running the numbers together, Steve? I mean, we've talked about micrograms for the oral tren and milligrams, 40 milligrams, for example, in the case of, do you know what? I might mitigate those numbers again. And for example, if I was running the two together, I'd probably run the Halo a little bit less. And we've got an article that we're going to associate with this podcast, guys, 20 to 30 milligrams a day. And something else you could possibly do specifically with the Halo, and some people do this with the Tren, but I'm thinking of the Halo specifically for this, just because of that small increase in aggression in certain users. So Steve and I didn't have that. 10, maybe 20 milligrams 2 hours before a strength workout, especially, and for those of you that are bodybuilders that are running up to the competitions, getting on stage, as you're getting tired, as you're becoming depleted, for that little bit of a kick. Again, I'm not a big fan of drugs pre-workout as such, but because you're using these anyway, you might get a small kick and additional benefit by using them 1 or 2 hours before. And again, 10, 20 milligrams, maybe 20 to 30, but I'm thinking again, combination for the trend, 20 to 30 milligrams is maybe a combination on its own 40 and maybe 10 to 20 before the workout, just for clarity. It's back to you, Steve.
At the end of the day, with oral trend, stacking it with Halo would be, I think it would be really dumb to run it any higher than 250 micrograms. But if you're running it solo, you could run it up to a 1 milligram. That's it. But in a stack, I wouldn't risk it. So I wanted to kind of go over some of the side effects that you can expect when it comes to side effects to watch out for on the cycle. Now, one of the side effects you're going to probably notice pretty quick, maybe after a week or 10 days on the cycle, is the fatigue. And that's going to be an issue. A lot of guys, including me, who have run, harsher stacks and you, Mobster, will notice when you're not in the gym, you feel lethargic, you feel blah all day.
Oh, yeah.
But then when you're in the gym, you're real, your adrenaline goes and everything, and then you have a hell of a workout on the stack, on a harsh stack, any harsh stack like this. So that's what you're going to experience, and that's going to be a telltale sign that your organs are under a lot of stress, not just your liver, your kidneys, your heart, everything else. Mobster mentioned earlier dark urine color. When I've been on a really harsh stack, I got seasickness. I've told a story a couple times on the podcast before. I went on a fishing trip about 13 miles offshore, lucky 13. As soon as we got like about a mile and a half offshore, it was over. Throwing up, diarrhea, nonstop. It was miserable. And half the boat was joining me. The problem was I was on a trend cycle, a pretty harsh trend cycle at the time. So I was pissing out brown on that. I came really close to dying, like seriously, to having liver failure on that experience. But that's what's going to happen here. So you want to be careful. Keep an eye on your liver. That's on your urine color, because that could be a telltale sign your liver's under a lot of stress. Another big one is jaundice. And I've seen this especially with younger guys who mistakenly take like a pro hormone that they think is safe, but it's really harsh on their liver. And we're talking, sadly, teenagers, and they end up posting pictures online of jaundice and, yellow eyes, yellow skin. That's a telltale sign of jaundice, and that's liver. That's definitely liver. So if you have any of these issues that that come up, the jaundice, the dark urine, even the stool, your bowels being dark, that's a telltale sign that you need to stop. That's it. Time to end the cycle and stop. The fatigue, okay, you can deal with that. You can push through it. But if it gets any worse than that, you got to do the smart thing and come up. So those are the telltale signs to go in. So I'll start touch on that, and we'll talk about some of the other benefits of this cycle that we can expect.
One of the analogies I've used in the past, Steve, when I think I've referred to a sports car, and I said sometimes when we use the stimulants and any of the fat burning steroids, clenbuterol, and any of these kind of hormones, thyroid hormones, etc., is essentially we're revving the engine. So let's use this analogy again. Guys, you're athletes. You're training in the gym. You should be, quote unquote, athletic in your approach, right? So this analogy, let's imagine as an athlete, you are a sports car. This is like using too rich of a fuel. And what happens? You're burning oil. Smoke's coming out the back. The engine's too hot. And lo and behold, you're kind of burning stuff up, man. You're wearing that engine. You're wearing out the bits between the engine. The stuff's overheating. And you can only do that briefly. It's basically by putting too rich of a fuel and then driving real fast. Yes, the richer fuel will give you a little bit more of a boost, but you're fucking the engine up, guys. And the engine is you. It's not just your heart, whatever else. The engine is you. So again, you expect, and I would expect fully on this cycle, a specifically greater response. But that much greater response, and I'm talking anabolically, I'm talking about strength or whatever else, comes with these issues. If the car overheats, if the car's smoking, that's not good. And this is what we're talking about here, guys. This is why we talk about sensible doses on every podcast. And we talk about specifically in this example, monitoring your bloods, using a product like N2Guard, and just being aware. Occasionally, we will see people come on the forums that have never used steroids before, and they got like 1.2, 1.5 grams, and we're like, no, you've never run anything. How the fuck do you know how you're going to respond? For me, this is an experienced user. Something else I should stay here, Steve, and me and you would agree on this. And the Halo article specifically mentioned is females should not use Halo testing under any circumstances. Occasionally, we will read stories about someone that needed to get super hard or whatever else. And I'm talking about women again. It's a real bad idea. No matter what the dosage is. I mean, this is the stuff that we're talking about users of men having problems. They are exaggerated above and beyond again for women. That's just nature. Feel free to argue otherwise, but it's just nature. And it's to do with testosterone, estrogen ratios, and body fat levels, and a bunch of other things which are specific to women and men. And it's just, you're just going to struggle, ladies, you're just going to have that much of a level of side effects over and above what a man would. And on this particular cycle, some users, honestly, approach this with care. Keep that in mind. As Steve said, I honestly, for me, it's a no. I can't see me thinking about running this, and especially at my age now, Steve, at any point in the not too distant future. I've run Halo on its own for a few weeks, didn't get so much, still never used Tren. That might be, maybe something that I'll use, but the two together, I can't see me between now and when they nail the lid on the box, putting this combination into effect. And certainly, if I can maybe a couple of weeks, if I decide to do some sort of strength competition, and then only low dosages. And I'd want to feel it working for that particular thing, but then I would do everything I possibly could to protect myself and make sure that everything else was on point in terms of my health and my diet and whatever else to give myself a greater chance of recovery as I possibly could. But again, I'm 58 now, Steve, as we do this podcast. The older I get, the less likely this stuff's going to come. Yeah, back to you.
Just kind of give you more ideas on how to use it pre-contest. So I would say you're going into a competition, and I would say you want to basically save this for the last 3 weeks. This is going to be your bomb. the last 3 weeks. You're going to take both of these. 0 estrogen aromatization with either one. Hardness. Right. I would basically do it like this. I wouldn't be using Trenbalone before this. Trenbalone is just too harsh. You would really, it would be counterproductive in my mind. So what I would focus on before this, really tiny dose of testosterone, maybe 100 milligrams, and then Masteron, say 500, 600 milligrams of Masteron, and then equipoise. Do like 500 to 1,000 milligrams of equipoise and run that, okay, for about 10, 12 weeks. And then when you stop all of that, including the testosterone, just stop it and then just go on this cycle. And then I would go with 250 micrograms of the oral Tren, and then I would go with the Halo about 10 milligrams. That's a really low end dosing, but you're stacking them together and you're coming off a mild cycle. Okay. So, yeah. And then these are going to harden you up. So versus jumping on Winstrol, jumping on Clen, jumping on, having Tren in your system, like usually competitors have, you would jump on this stack instead. And I think it would be a really cool thing to really try. And it could separate you from your competitors, on stage. I think it would be really interesting to see how you would do. So definitely that's the way I would run it. And then, once the competition is over, come off, take a break from anabolic steroid use, really give the liver a break, make sure you're taking your N2 guard, make sure you're taking your support supplements, do some fasting, just really do stuff to kind of repair all the damage you did to your organs. And I think that would be the best strategy to using this stack pre-contest. So Mobster, why don't you touch on that and give your opinion?
I'm just thinking, Steve, this is definitely not a cycle I would do if I was part of and I knew, you guys know I'm not, but if I was in a blast and cruise kind of guy. And what do we mean when we say blast and cruise? For those of you who don't know, it means doing harsher steroids or bigger doses of steroids during the blast, which is when you're blowing up, and then cruising in between cycles, as a lot of you guys seem to refer to, and I've addressed this before, as a way of holding on to muscle, and because you like how you feel when you're on a cycle, certainly when you're taking testosterone, regardless of the version. This is, to me, is not a cycle I would blast and cruise with. I wouldn't blast this and then go back to some sort of low dose testosterone in between. Certainly not at anything above TRT levels. So guys, keep that in mind. As I said, I always agree with Steve on these things. It's the reason why we do this podcast, because we don't differ too much in that particular regard, do we, Steve? So, I agree with him 1,000% in terms of the dosages. I think the only thing I've been talking about, because we talked about bodybuilding, and I agree with Steve 100%. It sounds very good. And I've actually listened to a podcast, a different one recently, Steve, where they were talking about taking out particular drugs in the last couple of weeks. And so, basically, guys, you're not looking for any water retention. You are looking to diet down. You are looking to condition down. You are looking to cardio down. This is one of those fun cycles. I mean, Masteron, as we talked about already, where you're going to have that gnarly, nasty look. Now, from a strength perspective, again, to me, you do the numbers. I said to the guys at the gym this morning, work the program, do the numbers. And then as you get closer to the competition, if you decide to use a cycle like this, and specifically this one for strength, I'd probably only run it a couple of weeks, Steve, because I should have done the work in the gym. And for me, it's one of those guaranteeing that I am going to kick ass on the day. Now, whether that's on stage as a bodybuilder, looking super hard and freaky looking, and as Steve says, separating yourself from the rest of the pack and giving yourself a chance for the first, the second, or the third place, in other words, up on the podium, for me, it would be the same thing in strength training. So in competitions, I want that edge. That's how my brain works. I want the edge because I've done the training. I want the edge because I've done the work. And this is something to me with that increasing aggression, especially on the weightlifting platform, especially on the field of play, that last part where everything else is done, and all I want on the day is to almost be raging. I want that level of aggression that this will give me. I almost want the irritable feeling that this is going to give me, because it's going to make me feel nasty, and I'm going to get in there and I'm going to crush the bar and I'm going to kill the weights and, give the ref the evil eye, whatever. And in terms of doing my absolute best, the adrenaline and the serotonin from winning it's going to make me a nice guy right after the competition. But when I'm lifting those weights, I want to be nasty. And I suspect for me, this would be that kind of cycle, Steve. It's gonna maybe again, if you're sensitive, it might put you slightly on edge, but you're gonna be firing. You're gonna be firing. Those muscle fibers are gonna be firing, and you're gonna be kicking ass, and you're gonna be squeezing the bar harder than normal. You're gonna be lifting harder than normal. So, and again, it's 100% after the cycle. I don't think it's, as I said just now, a cruising cycle. This is for me, come off and go clean. If you know something else in terms of the, you mentioned the urine, I mentioned it earlier on, Steve, hydrate. Guys, if you drink, let's say 4 liters of water a day, add another liter. Seriously, up your hydration, flush the system out, and you must use an organ protector. It is a given. There's no question here, guys. 100% you need an organ protector like N2 Guard on this cycle. We could talk about the dosages for this, Steve. So we talked about the micrograms and milligrams for the Trent and the Halo. I know I've said this a bunch of times on the forum, guys. If the pot says 7, why can't you take 7, guys? You don't need to reinvent the wheel. This is one of the few times I might actually up the dosages, Steve. And the associated article for the Halo talks about 9. And if you do peak out at around 30 milligrams a day, because that's the highest that we talked about, especially running it solo, then you might run as high as 11 capsules a day. Typically, I think the recommendation most days is 7, but we're talking about 2 super harsh orals in combination for a short period of time. So where I would normally recommend following the recommendation on the side of the tub, here is the one occasion where I would up the dose. And I think if nothing else, Steve, it's a psychological thing. I just want to be sure that I'm keeping myself as healthy as possible. Back to you.
Look, at the end of the day, I think on this one of my tips is naps. So depending on when you work out, if you can get in a nap after your workout, that's going to help tremendously. Your body's going to be under a lot of stress. You're cutting into your competition. You're running this cycle. Your body's under a lot of stress. The best thing for stress is sleep. Sleep is the time for your body to release that stress, calm, and everything. Look into supplements like GABA. GABA are really good for calming. Look into other calming supplements, and those will help kind of relax your mind. Look into doing some meditation, some yoga before bed. That's going to help relax your mind. You don't want to be eating a lot of unhealthy foods. You don't want to be eating any unhealthy foods. When you eat unhealthy foods, it stresses your body out more. So one of the keys, I mean, not that you should be eating clean already, you're competing here. This is a pre-contest stack. You should be eating clean already. So there's really no excuse. You eat trash food, you stress out your body. That's the bottom line. Watch out for the refined oils. They're in everything. Watch out for the preservatives. They're in everything. The additives, the dyes, the food dyes, unnatural foods, processed foods, stay the hell away from them. Eat a whole food, natural diet. And that's going to be the less stress. The more things you put in your body at one time, the more stress on your body. Think about it. So if you get like a shake, everyone loves shakes. Everyone thinks bodybuilders drink shakes. Okay. The bodybuilders I know don't drink shakes, by the way. But shakes are horrible for stressing out your body, because if you think about it, you're putting like 8 things in the shake and you're mixing it, right? You're blending it, you're processing it. It's going in your body. Now your body has to process what you just put into it. Your body doesn't know what the hell to do. It's got 8 different things hitting it at the same time. It's got to produce enzymes, all these enzymes to digest what you just put into it. How the hell does that make sense? So you got to just don't think, oh my God, emotional stress is stress. Yes, it is, but also the foods you're putting in your body and the wrong things you're putting in your body are also stressing your body. So Mobster, touch on final thoughts and take us to the disclaimer. Yeah. Great show.
I'll dispute what Steve says. The only reason for that, Steve, because normally you and I agree on a great many things, is that I have my whey protein, my shake is unflavored. There's nothing in there. There's no sweeteners, there's no colorings, there's no additives, there's no preservatives, there's nothing. I think it's got soy lecithin as an emulsifier. That's it. And that's just so that the powder doesn't stick to beer and it shakes up nicely. So, guys, most of you won't like it. Most of you need the sweetener. Most of you need the flavoring or whatever. I don't have it like that. So I'm having one thing, maybe 2, not 8 like Steve says. So, yeah, I mean, this is the thing, guys. And I said this for other podcasts. many drugs, and especially this cycle, is so goddamn patent. You almost think potent, even. You almost think that you can do stupid stuff and get away with it. And maybe the freaks of you, they might be able to do that. But here's the reality, guys. The rest of you cannot. So, as always, work hard, eat clean. You should feel, whether it's for strength or for a bodybuilding competition, dog tired, especially in the last few weeks when you're running this cycle. I want to feel like that, Steve. I want to feel fucked up because I want to feel that I've outworked every other motherfucker there is, especially back in the day when I was kicking ass. I wanted to feel like a beaten up old man because I didn't want anybody else to work hard than me. Now, if you're a bodybuilder, same applies. It's not a physically nice sensation, but it means your diet's in point, that you're losing body fat, that you're getting ripped. In order to force that shit to happen, you've got to do stuff that most human beings don't do. You're kind of half starving, you're half out working, you're lifting crazy weights in the gym, and that's how you present that physique on stage with this cycle. And the same thing for a strength competition, powerlifting competition, doing fucked up shit that no one else is doing in order to be the best, to win, to get that trophy, to have that big number that no one else has pulled. So keep that in mind, but for short periods of time only, and it works so much better if the diet and the cardio and the work is all on point. Don't be lazy, motherfuckers. I don't think our listeners are lazy, motherfuckers, but don't be, just in case. As always, please note, we are not doctors, and the opinions on these shows are ours and ours alone. It's our view and based on our experience and views on the topic. Our podcast of informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.